It was March 13th, 1919. The city of New Orleans, Louisiana, was holding its breath. The city, famous for its music, its food, and its joy for life, was in the grip of a paralyzing fear. It was not a fear of war, though the Great War had just ended. It was the fear of a single man, a phantom who slipped into locked homes in the dead of night, armed not with a gun, but with the most brutal of tools, an axe. For over a year, he had haunted the city. And now, he had made a demand, one of the most bizarre demands in the history of crime. In a letter sent to the city's newspapers, he promised to visit the city again the following Tuesday at 12:15 in the morning. And he promised to kill without mercy. But he offered one way out. He claimed, a lover of music, and he would spare any house, he wrote, where a jazz band was playing in full swing. This is not the file of an ordinary killer. This is the dossier of a boogeyman who made an entire city play for their lives. This is the dossier of the Axeman. To understand the letter, we must go back. The Axeman story begins 1 year earlier. In the summer of 1918, New Orleans was a humid melting pot of immigrants, sailors, voodoo practitioners, and merchants. The first attack occurred on May 22, 1980. Joseph Marchio, an Italian grocer, and his wife, Catherine, lived in an apartment at the back of their shop in the French Quarter. That morning, Joseph's brother, Jake, was woken by a gurgling sound. He broke down his brother's door and found a scene of absolute horror. Joseph and Catherine were in their bed, soaked in their own blood. Their skulls had been crushed. The killer had used an axe to bludgeon them, and then a barber's razor to cut their throats. The room was covered in blood, but the strangest part was how the killer got in. Police found no forced doors. Instead, they found the lower panel of the back door, carefully chiseled out and removed. The killer had crawled through the opening, committed the crime, and left the same way, leaving the bloody axe behind. The New Orleans police, led by Superintendent Frank Mooney, were stunned. The brutality was extreme, but robbery wasn't the motive. Money and jewelry were left behind. Suspicion immediately fell on the Mafia or the Black Hand. The Madios were Sicilian. Perhaps it was a vendetta, but the theory didn't fit. This crime didn't have the signature of a mob hit. It was ... personal. The city was nervous, but panic hadn't set in yet. Then, 1 month later, he attacked again. On June 27th, Louis Besumer, another Italian grocer, and his mistress, Harriet Lowe, were attacked in their apartment, just a few blocks from the Maggio scene. Both were struck in the head with a hatchet as they slept. Again, the back door panel was chiseled out. Again, the axe was left behind. This time, neighbors heard the moans. Besumer and Lowe were found alive. Harriet Lowe regained consciousness briefly, telling police the culprit was Louis B. Besumer, but police suspected she was delirious. She died a few days later. Louis Besumer survived, but the trauma left him unable to provide any clues. The city now knew. This was not an isolated incident. The pattern was set. The target was Italian grocers. The method of entry was the chiseled panel. The weapon was the victim's own axe. The Italian-America community in New Orleans panicked. Men bought shotguns. Families boarded up their back doors. But the Axeman didn't care. On August 5th, he attacked Anna Schneider, a 20-year-old woman. She was found by her husband, Ed, in a pool of blood, her face covered in lacerations, but still alive. She was 8 months pregnant. Anna survived, but the baby did not. This time, the victim was not Italian. The pattern, which police thought they understood, was broken. The killer wasn't just targeting Italians. He was targeting anyone. A few days later, another attack. Joseph Romano, another Italian, his young niece, Pauline, walked into his room and saw her uncle staggering, his head split open, blood pouring. Pauline saw the killer fling, a tall, heavy-set man, wearing a dark suit and a slouched hat. It was the first and only time anyone ever saw him. Joseph Romano died hours later. Superintendent Mooney was desperate. The city's press was crucifying him. He had no leads, no suspects, and now, a described phantom. The fall and winter of 1918 passed in a tense silence. The Spanish flu epidemic swept the city, killing thousands, and for a time, people were more afraid of germs than axes. But on March 10th, 1919, the Axeman proved he hadn't left. The Cortimiglia family, Sicilian immigrants, lived across the river in Gretna. A neighbor heard screaming. Charles Cortimiglia ran out, holding his badly wounded 2-year-old daughter. Rosie, His wife, Rosie Cortimiglia, was on the floor inside, her head crushed. The killer had used the family's axe. Little Mary, the couple's other daughter, was dead in her mother's arms. The attack on the Cortimiglia family was the most brutal of all. It shocked the city to its core. Police arrested a neighbor, Orlando Jordano, based on Rosie's delirious testimony. He was found guilty, despite a total lack of evidence. The Axeman was still free, and now an innocent man was going to prison. It was at this moment, at the peak of public panic, that the Axeman decided to write. On March 13, 1919, a letter arrived at the editor of the New Orleans Times. It was postmarked from hell. The letter was a masterpiece of psychological terror. It was taunting, boastful, and utterly theatrical. Esteemed mortals, it began. I am an evil spirit, a demon from the hottest depths of hell. I am what you call a boogeyman. The letter was long and arrogant. The author claimed that only he knew who he was, and that the idiotic police would never catch him. He claimed the murders, describing himself as an angel of death. He said he enjoyed frightening people, and that the deaths were just a bonus. He mocked the investigation, saying the police were as wrong as the pagans and their gods. And then he got to the point. The ultimatum: next Tuesday night, at 12:15, I shall pass over New Orleans. In my infinite mercy, I will make you a small proposition. I am a lover of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils that obey my command, that every person in whose home a jazz band is playing in full swing shall be spared. He was very clear. If you have a jazz band, play it. If you have a phonograph, play it. If you are an amateur musician, play. But those who do not play shall receive the axe. The city exploded. Was the letter real? Was it a hoax by a board reporter? No one knew, but given the carnage of the last 9 months, no one was willing to take the chance. What happened next, on Tuesday, March 18, 1919, was one of the most surreal nights in American history. The city that lived in fear decided to fight the demon with music. Superintendent Mooney, though skeptical, doubled the patrols. But the real challenge was accepted by the people. In every dance hall in the French Quarter, bands played with a feverish energy, non-stop, the trombones and clarinets wailing into the night. In the Heenan restaurants, dinners were turned into last-minute jazz parties. People made toasts to the Axeman, mocking him with champagne. And in the humble homes, on the stuffy porches of the Garden District and the Bywater, people gathered. Those who had a phonograph put their records of Louis Armstrong or the original Dixieland Jazz Band on full volume, with the windows wide open. Those who didn't made their own music. Families banged pots and pans. They sang, they played out-of-tune pianos. The entire city, rich and poor united in a deafening, joyful sound. New Orleans wasn't hiding. It was throwing a party against the devil. When the clock struck 12:15 a.m., the city was a cacophony of sound, and the Axeman ... did not appear. He had kept his word. No one was murdered that night. The fear broke. The city had faced the bogeyman and won. The Axeman would attack a few more times. A grocer named Steve Boca in August. A young woman named Sarah Lohman in September. Both survived. His final act was on October 27, 1919. He attacked Mike Pepitone, another grocer. Pepitone's wife found her husband dead and saw the killer fleeing. And then, silence. As quickly as it had begun, the Axeman's reign of terror was over. He just disappeared. The dossier remains open. Who was he? The police never solved the case. The theories are vast. The prime suspect, for years, was Joseph Mumford, a man shot to death in 1920 by Mike Pepitone's widow. But the evidence was circumstantial. Others say it was the mafia after all, using a lunatic killer as a cover for extortion murders. The darkest theory is that the Axeman was not one, but many. That he was a cult, or a hired killer, who was silenced when his job was done. Or perhaps, as the letter suggested, he was something more. A spirit of the city, born from the heat, the music, and the violence that defines New Orleans. He was a ghost who demanded a soundtrack, a killer who used jazz as a psychological weapon, and a mystery that will never be solved. Some stories were never meant for the light, but they are the stories that must be told. They are the files that must be opened. This has been a file from America's Dark Dossier. If you believe that the past is never truly dead, subscribe ... and help us open the next file.